Hi guys, and today we're going to be doing a lens review of the Canon 10 to 18mm f4.5 to 5.6 IS lens. And I'm going to start right now. What is up guys, Photo Fever here and welcome back to the channel. And if it's your first time here guys and you want to learn all about Photoshop, Lightroom and everything photography related, consider subscribing and hitting the bell notification so you guys don't miss anything. So in this lens review, we're going to be having a closer look at the Canon 10 to 18mm f4.5 to 5.6. Now this is an ultra wide angle APS-C lens designed for the smaller sensors that Canon offer, the EF-S mount, but there are quite a few different lenses available. So today we're going to be working out what is the best one for your camera. So the first thing I want to talk about guys is the overall build quality and the design of this lens. Now if you've ever owned the kit lens, the 18 to 55mm, that lens is a complete plastic construction, and this lens, to be honest, is very similar. Even the mount on the back is plastic, which means this lens is very light, but I must say it is quite cheap. I must say I probably wouldn't bring this to the top of a mountain, or if let's say you're going outside, because it doesn't offer weather sealing, and to be honest, the lack of actual metal on this lens makes it feel incredibly cheap. But again, it is a fairly cheap and budget orientated lens. Now this lens actually has two rings. You've got the very large zoom ring, which is pretty much the entire size of the lens with a rubber feel to it, and it makes it really easy to move from 10 to 18mm with a slight amount of dampening to it. And then at the very top here, you can actually see it's got a very small focus ring. Now this ring is a fly-by-wire in construction, which means it's really easy and very precise to move, but it does mean that this lens does not have full-time manual focus mode, which to be honest isn't surprising for a lens of this price. And then we go ahead and look at the side. You can see it's got a automatic to manual focus button, which is actually really handy to have. And then you've also got your image stabilization on and image stabilization off. Now I must say, out of the other lenses, especially if you upgrade to the Canon 10 to 22mm, that is a lot more of a plastic and more of a premium constructed lens. So if you're after a lens with a little bit more of a better build quality, I definitely wouldn't necessarily recommend this lens over other lenses. But I must say, overall, it isn't that bad. It is a little bit cheaper, but I must say there are better options out there available. So because of that, I'm only going to be giving this lens a 5 out of 10 for build quality. So next, let's talk about the all-important image quality. Is this lens any good for taking photos? Well, to be honest, this lens actually offers quite a unique focal length, especially for APS-C cameras. Now, because of all APS-C cameras have a crop of 1.6, that means you have to crop all of the numbers on the front here by 1.6. So in fact, if we're looking at the equivalent lens, especially when it comes to anything landscape related, this would be the 16 to 35mm that's available by Canon's full frame cameras. And it offers a focal length of 10, obviously, to 18, which means this is a very wide angle lens for your APS-C camera. It's in fact one of only 3 lenses that offers this incredibly wide angle look for your Canon APS-C camera. Now this means it's really good for landscape and kind of portrait photography, as you can see by some of the sample images, but it doesn't mean that this lens is optically perfect. In fact, this lens did suffer from quite a few issues. The chromatic aberration was quite bad, especially wide open at either f4.5 or 5.6. And I must say, I did notice quite bad distortion and vignetting wide open at 10mm. Now that doesn't mean that this lens is going to be terrible for photos. You can actually use the distortion and vignetting in a creative way to create really good distorted looks by, you can see some of the sample images here. And I must say the close-up quality was also really good. So if you're planning on doing any macro work, this lens is actually really interesting because you can create really wide angle macro shots while still offering that nice shallow depth of field if you do get close enough to your subject. Now, talking about the outer focus edges, the bokeh isn't necessarily, or it doesn't render very well. I must say, I did notice a few other lenses especially rendered better, simply because of the actual minimum aperture of this is just f4.5, which means it isn't necessarily great for low light and it isn't great for creating a very shallow depth of field. You have to actually get incredibly close to your subject to offer any kind of shallow depth of field look. So overall, I was actually impressed with this lens, especially for the incredibly wide angle nature, but overall, overall, the quality, the actual optical quality, isn't as good as other lenses on the market, like the Sigma 10 to 20mm. So I'm only going to be giving this lens a 7 out of 10, although if you're after a cheap wide-angle lens for your APS-C camera, this is a really good lens to purchase. So next, let's talk about the size and weight of this lens. Now, to be honest, if you've ever had the Canon 18 to 55mm, the kit lens that comes with a lot of Canon cameras today, this is pretty much the same size and weight. This lens, the Canon 10 to 18mm, comes in at just 240 grams, and the Canon 18 to 55mm comes in at 215 grams. So if you own these two lenses and you want to swap them out in your bag, to be honest, they take up pretty much the same size and the same weight. So it's really easy to interchange these lenses if you're going out, for instance, on a day trip. Now this lens is quite small, and you can see that by looking at the filter thread size, only coming in at 67mm, which is great if you're planning on buying inexpensive either UV protection filters or circular polarizer filters. They're not going to break the bank if you want to buy accessories for this lens, which is great. Now the other lenses are a lot heavier, and this is simply because they've got larger apertures than this lens that we're comparing to today. So if we go ahead and compare it to the Sigma 10 to 20mm, that offers an aperture of f3.5 versus the minimum aperture of this, which is 4.5. This makes this lens larger but also heavier, coming in at 465 grams. And the only lens other lens I want to compare it to today is the Sigma 18 to 35mm, which is, to be honest, one of my favorite lenses if you're wanting to buy a wide angle lens for your APS-C camera. But because this offers an aperture of f1.8, this is a lot larger and a lot heavier, coming in at 810 grams. So if you're after a really small, compact lens that you can interchange it with the kit lens that you already have, then this lens is going to be perfect. So for that reason, I'm going to be giving it a 9 out of 10 for size and weight. So next I want to talk about is the focus motor and image stabilization. Now, straight off the bat, this lens has image stabilization, which is ideal because this lens doesn't have a great aperture. You're naturally going to be shooting at lower shutter speeds, which means you could actually introduce motion blur, which is not ideal if you want sharp images. So this lens offers up to 4 stops of image stabilization, which is great for getting sharper images in lower light situations, especially as most cameras that Canon do for their APS-C range does not have image stabilization built in the form of IBIS. So having optical image stabilization in the lens is really important. And I must say, I tested this as low as a 40th of a second, and I was still able to get sharper images even when not using a tripod. So I must say this lens is really good if you're after a lens with lower light capabilities, even though the aperture isn't necessarily great for that. Now let's talk about the actual focus motor. Now this focus motor is incredibly quick and actually I would say quite successful at getting sharp images. And that's what's really good about this lens. I must say I was really blown away by the sharpness of this lens, even in the center and the edges of the photo. And that really helps with a great image stabilization, but also the focus motor being sharp and accurate. So overall, I was actually really impressed with both parts of that lens's accessories. The image stabilization was really good and the focus motor was definitely difficult to beat. So for that reason, I'm going to be giving it a 9 out of 10 for focus motor and image stabilization. And last but most importantly is the price. How well is this lens compared to when we go have a look at the competition lenses such as the Canons and Sigmas that are available? So firstly, this lens comes in at £259, which is just a little bit more expensive than I was expecting. Let's say if we compare it to the Canon 18 to 55mm, which usually comes free with a lot of cameras today, if you did go ahead and purchase that third party, you'd be spending around £229. So you can see this lens is a little bit more expensive than the kit lens, but I must say you are getting a slightly better focal length because you can get such wide angles, which is quite unusual for an APS-C camera. So how can this compare to the Sigma lenses available? The Sigma 10 to 20mm f3.5 to 4.5 actually comes in slightly more at £319, but you are getting better build quality and you're getting a better aperture, a minimum aperture of f3.5, which means it's better for low light situations. And this lens also comes with image stabilization. And the only other lens I really want to compare it to is the Sigma 18 to 35mm f1.8 art lens. This is by far the best wide angle lens for your APS-C camera. But the only problem is it's a lot heavier, a lot larger, and it comes in at a lot higher price of £699. This lens is definitely more geared to the more budget orientated side than the image quality side. But if you are after a small, compact lens that you can just chuck in your bag and not necessarily worry about it, and you're after an ultra wide angle look, this lens is actually ideal for you. So for that reason, I'm going to be giving it an 8 out of 10 for price. So what are my final thoughts on this lens, and should you end up buying one? Well, to be honest, I was actually impressed with the image quality and the image stabilization and focus motor of this lens. It is a lot better than the kit lens, and because it offers a focal length of 10 to 18mm, this lens is actually a lot better for getting wider angle shots. Let's say you're more interested in doing landscapes or maybe even street photography, this lens is ideal. The only issue is the build quality. I must say I was not impressed with the full plastic construction. Even if we compare it to the even cheaper Canon 50mm f1.8, even that has a metal mount on the back, which makes it a little bit more better for longevity. But because this lens is fully plastic, it is very likely to break even when you drop it, which is a little bit disappointing, and it's not something I was expecting from a lens. So let's go and have a look at the final results. Well, this lens comes in at 38 out of 50, which is a recommended lens, especially if you're after a wide angle look. And I'm going to be giving it a bronze award for price because this lens is by far one of the cheapest native Canon lenses you can purchase, although I wouldn't say it's one of the best. Again guys, if you want to like, comment and subscribe to my channel, it really does help my channel grow. Also guys, if you want to hit the bell notification so you guys don't miss any of my latest content. But until next time guys, keep creating.